Here, whenever you record, one repository will be created by default. That is what is called local repository. And there's one more repository which is called shared repository. How to create a shared repository? It can be created from a local repository. Open the repository, go to File menu, Export Local Objects. Click this one. And it will ask for a file name. Just give a file name, shared rep1. And shared repositories will be stored with the extension .tsr. Those are files of type tsr. Save that. So you have a shared repository created. And why do you want a shared repository, and what are the differences between local repository and shared repository? Local repository means this can be used only by this test. Let us see, our test name is test26. So this repository can be used only by this test26. Suppose you go for a new test. Okay, let us have the script. Open a new test. I'm just writing the code here. I just put the code. But will the script execute fine? Because if you come, okay, save this test also, say test27. If you go to resources and go for object repository is empty. And here it is using only logical names. So obviously your test will give us the error, isn't it? It will not work fine because there's no objects in the repository and it cannot identify the objects. Suppose if I want to use the same script with some modifications, and just I wrote the same script here, but I need to record again to get the objects into the repository, or else I need to add the objects manually. I need to open the application and I have to add the objects manually by clicking on add objects to local. If suppose there are so many objects in the application, in the real time there will be so many objects, so it's not possible to add the objects every time. So what you can do, you can just use the shared repository which we have created and which contains all these objects. So how to add the shared repository here? Already we have a shared repository by name shared rep1.tsr. Now we need to associate that shared repository to our test. Means add that repository to this particular test27. Let us go to resources menu. Here you see associate repositories. Select it. You see a window associate repositories and you see repositories and a plus symbol. You click on this symbol add repository. So this is the repository you want to add. Add it to your test. And also available actions you are seeing here. Select the action and say okay. Then click OK. Now your shared repository is associated with your test. Again go to resources, object repository. You see all the repository now. Previously it was blank, but now you have added the shared repository to your test. Now if you execute your script, it will work fine because objects are there in the repository. Means the basic difference between the shared repository and local repository is that shared repository can be used across multiple tests. And also, if suppose there are 6 tests using the same shared repository, here we are using test27, and if you are going to use test28, test29, test30, and also you associate the repository in the same way like this, means all the 4 tests are using the same common repository. Suppose there's a need to make some changes for the property values, like we changed the property value of this cancel button. So if you use local repository, you need to open each test, go to the repository and make changes to each and every repository. But here, since all the 4 tests is using only the common repository, you can make change only once. That's enough. So that all the tests whichever using the repository will be affected. Similarly, if we want to add some objects in this test to the repository, you add it to the shared repository. So if any other test is going to use, again those objects can be used there. So maintenance becomes easy, and also if any error is there in the script, suppose you have you are using a local repository, you are having an error in the script, you correct it, you correct in the repository, so that will be affected into only that test. If you use shared repository, all the 6 tests can be corrected without getting into the errors because of changes made in the applications, or if any object is missing, adding once is enough, so that it will protect all the 6 tests from getting failed. And again, see the repository. This is the shared repository. If you see here, you cannot make any modifications here. It's only read only mode, or everything grayed out or disabled. Means you cannot make changes to the shared repository in this object repository. If you want to make changes to the shared repository, you have to use object repository manager. Where is that? Again, go to resources menu. Here it is, object repository manager. So this is your object repository manager. Again, go to file, open. Here select the repository, select the shared repository for which you want to make any modifications. This is the shared repository, so selecting that. Again, it is in the disable mode or read only mode. So again, go to file menu, enable editing. So everything got enabled. You can make any modifications, whatever you want to make, like a local repository. Means whenever you want to edit your shared repository, you cannot directly do it in the repository window. You have to go for the object repository manager. Then only you can, there only you can make any changes to the shared repository. Now you can make all the operations like you are doing in the normal repository, local repository. Delete, highlight, add, locate objects in the repository, and all. Or else delete, cut, paste. You can do everything like a local repository. But it cannot be edited directly in the repository window. You have to open the object repository manager window. There's one more thing you can do in this repository manager. Go to tools menu. Here you see object repository comparison tool. Select it. It will ask for first file. Means this is a tool where you can compare two shared repositories. Suppose you are having two repositories. One repository is having some objects belonging to the first page of the application, and some shared repository contains objects which belongs to the second page in the application. Suppose you want to compare those two repositories. Means you want to find the differences, what are the new objects in the second page. Then you can use this tool. Just it will compare the repositories. So select the first repository file, browse here, select the repository whatever you want to do, rep1, and the second one is also a shared repository with the extension tsr. Select it, rep2. Now you have selected the two repositories. Select OK. It will show you the statistics, what are the conflicts are there, or else any matchings are there. It will show object statistics. It shows 6 identical objects in both the files. Means both are containing the same files. This is a shared repository 1 and this is repository 2. If there are any differences, it will show it here. Like it shows 0 objects unique to first file, 0 objects unique to second file. Means both are having same objects. And third one, 0 objects with identical descriptions and different names. Means descriptions are same but names are different. 0 objects are there like that. 0 objects with similar descriptions. So it will give the entire statistics of the objects in both the repositories. So that is about the comparison tool. If you want to know what is the new objects present in some other different repository from which we are using, you can use this comparison tool. Just it will give what are the different objects in the new repository. Similarly, again go to tools. Sorry, this is a comparison tool. So just close it. Again come to the object repository manager, tools. You see object repository merge tool. Select it. Again it will ask for the first repository and second repository. Here it will merge the two repositories. Suppose you are having a one repository for page 1, second repository for page 2, and in the third repository you want to use the complete both the repositories 1 and 2. So if you want to combine that as a make a one shared repository, you can do it by using this tool. It will ask for the two files, which is I'm just giving rep1 and rep2, and say OK. Again it will show you the conflicts, no conflicts found, because both are same. And if you want to save this, it will give you save option. So it will give a file name, new file name, by which you can save the file, merge those things and save it. If there are any differences, then it will merge those and prepare a new repository. That's what's called object repository merge tool. In the real-time scenarios, we'll never be using local repositories. Local repositories are only for our learning purpose. In the real-time scenarios, in the real-time projects, they'll maintain a common shared repository which contains all the objects present in the application. Why? Because suppose here I'm using shared repository, of course, okay, and suppose here I'm using local repository, means repository of my own. So I make some changes to the local repository. So suppose if I want to make some changes like this logical name, I'll make changes to the repository. Or else if I want, I'll add objects of my own to the local repository. And suppose if other tester is not making that modifications to his repository, then there's a chance of his script getting error. We will not find that bug, but he will get the bug. So because any project is a teamwork, all the testing should be done with the same descriptions and the same objects added to the repository. So what they'll do is they will maintain only one single repository, and everyone from different machines will also be accessing the same shared repository. Means all the team members will be using a single shared repository, and also editing the repository will not be given access to every member. There'll be all the repository will be maintained by a single person in the team, and he will be looking after whether adding the objects or making any changes to the property values. Suppose if I am using a local repository in my project, and if I make because there were some modifications in the test script or else in the application, so I make changes to the property values here. This is shared, so you cannot edit it. Okay, so you are making changes to your own repository, so you test the scenario so you don't get any defect. But the other member, whoever using the same application, is not making changes in his own local repository, so he'll get the defect. So he will say that is a defect, and you will say that it's not a defect. So to avoid these problems, all the changes and all the renaming or modifications will be done in the single shared repository, and it will be done and looked after by a single person in the team. Access will be given only to one particular person, so that all the testing will be done uniformly in the team with the same settings and the same property values. Whenever required, he will make the changes, and that will be reflected for all the testers, for all the test scenarios, and for all the test scripts whoever using. So this is about different types of repositories and different operations performed on the repositories.